Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Get Wealth podcast. I'm super excited for the guest on today, Pete Reese. Super successful land investor. I'm sure you do a lot more than that, but just from social media, it looks like you're doing quite a few land deals. And I think that's a really good strategy to build wealth, to create active income, passive income. I think you can do a lot in the land investing space. So really excited to have you on and yeah, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Brendan. I really am looking forward to it, and love the name of your podcast too. So, Get Wealth Podcast. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I started the podcast in 2020 when the pandemic and everything. So it was kind of a play on get well, but get wealth. So I just stuck with it. But
Yeah,
maybe if enough people watch it and have suggestions, then maybe the name will change later on. But
yeah, I love it. Stick with it. Go with it.
okay, cool. Well, I guess let's start out with your background story. How did you get to where you're at? And you can kind of give the 30,000 foot view. Was it always land investing? Like, how did it evolve to what it is now?
Yeah, well, it's been kind of as the Beatles would say, it's a long and winding road.
Mhm.
I went to college. After college, I moved out to California. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, and a friend of mine and we decided like, hey, there's not a lot of opportunity around there, so we'll move out to California after college. And figured if we didn't like it, we could always move back. So both of us ended up staying out here in San Diego and never looked back. Got my family to move out here and everything, which has been really pretty cool. But yeah, my real estate, oh, after college, I thought I was going to be a stockbroker. So that's what I did for a while. I got a job with Prudential Securities, got my Series 7 and 63 license. So I was advising people how to handle their net worth when I was myself living paycheck to paycheck. So it was it was a real dilemma for me. Like I never felt confident in it because, I was not coming from that place of like knowing how they felt or actually, so these people, their life savings and everything they had worked for. And, I'm sure it probably didn't convey in my confidence that, I could help them out. I got clients and everything like that, but after a little while, I just realized it kind of wasn't really in alignment with me. Um, did a number of other things, starting like my own business and stuff like that related to um, uh, my father-in-law. Well, I got married. My father-in-law had a business related to auto parts, so helped him kind of with that business, and we sort of were partnering on that. And but I knew that my passion really was real estate, and in that time, we bought a home. Thought I held it for about 2 years and made about $50,000 on it, did some kind of DIY type improvements ourselves. And I thought I was kind of the next real estate mogul, just because, probably the market itself went up and that was about it. Uh, but then took that money, kind of let it ride into another property that is bigger and needed more work. We ended up doing well on that one as well. And that kind of started a thing where my wife and I, we were doing house flipping sort of full time. And this was back in the early 2000s, and I know it's been super popular and everything lately, but it was actually popular back then as well. There were all those shows on the HGTV, probably not to the level that it is now. But so we were doing that. Everything was great until the market crashed. I had gotten my broker's license um, before the market crashed, and, just to get better access to deals because I was buying all my deals on the market. And yeah, when the market crashed, I was like, okay, what do I do now? Home flipping really didn't work. So I decided to just kind of go all in on the foreclosure thing that was happening. And I positioned myself as a REO listing broker for all the banks, kind of helping them sell off all their inventory, which was a ton of it at the time. Did that for a couple years, got some great connections with lots of other investors out there, and it was finding deals for them and did that for a while. Got kind of sidetracked in the about 2017 ish area. Not sidetracked, but started a business with my wife. She had been a blogger for a long time, lifestyle and travel blogging and everything. And she had so many people all the time kind of asking her how she did what she did. And so I was like, hey, let's create like a education business around this. And I got out of real estate completely. And that was like my primary focus for years. And we worked together on that and built something pretty big. and
Wow.
we were, many premium students and everything. So it was a great business. But I had that passion for real estate, and I wanted to get back into it. Kind of stumbled into land flipping. I knew nothing about land. I mean, I had bought and sold a lot of properties and homes before, but not land. And
Mm.
just saw some people talking about how you can buy a property for $10,000 and sell it for 30,000. I was like, well, this is great, triple my money, in a couple months. So I got kind of down that rabbit hole of learning about land flipping, bought a course on it, and then I just dove all in. And this is 2021. I ended up that was the first year I did any sort of land flips. 20 March of 2021 resold our first land flip. That first year did about 1.2 million in some change in revenue, about 650 some in gross profit. Year two did about $3.5 million in revenue, and gross profit that year, I'm looking at my whiteboard right behind here, was about 1.5 million in gross profit. 2023, almost 8.2 million in revenue and nearly 3 million in gross profit. So we're kind of leveling up each year. This year I want to do 20 million. So we'll see what happens.
Whoa, holy smokes. Yeah, that's like a meteoric rise there, with just from, just finding out about land and then all the way to here we are. That's some impressive numbers. Let's start with just like what, because a lot of people, I mean, like yourself, houses, that's kind of the one that's even more popular. I'm not even sure most people would even understand, like, what do you mean by flipping land? Because you
Mm.
can't fix it up or anything. That's kind of like the first
Yeah.
thought people might have. Why do you think, or do you think flipping land is a better strategy, or do you think it just fits better to with what you like? How do you compare the two?
To me, it's much simpler. I mean, anytime you're flipping a home, you've got a lot of logistics involved. You've got the rehab, you've got contractors you're dealing with, you've got unseen things that you don't know about until you open up a wall or something like that. So one problem leads to another in those home flips, and the timeline is difficult. So there's just a lot of moving pieces. It's not something that's basic or for beginners, and a lot of beginners jump into that. And it's there's money to be made in it. Obviously, it's a good business model for some, and some people really take to it. But I think there's easier ways to do things. You know,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
and land flipping is that. I mean, you're buying properties off market at a discount, the discount to what they're actually worth, and you're putting them on the market, listing them at a price that's attractive, slightly below market to attract that buyer quickly, and then reselling it. Now we do some fixing up of these properties, some value add, we call it. Sometimes it'll be simply hiring a brush clearing company to go out there, clear some paths on a property, clear a potential home site, something like that. Sometimes we'll do a perk test. Sometimes we'll do a survey. Other properties that are larger, sometimes we'll do a lot split and split it up into, 100-acre property. We'll split it up into 5 20-acre properties and sell them off individually. So doing all those things creates value. That's why we call it value add. And so it's not every case though. Sometimes we just buy a property at a great discount and then resell it on the market. So
I see. Okay. What was your first deal like? So, and like from
yeah.
kind of start to finish, how'd you get the deal? How'd you exit the deal? What was the property like?
Yeah. So the first deal was it was kind of like in a community where it was, I guess, I wouldn't say vacation community, but it was like a lake, kind of like a master plan, like lake community in the Pacific Northwest. I think this was in Clark County, Washington, I think it was. And it was a cool little community. And it was a combination of people that would build like cabins there, or sometimes they would allow people to have RVs on their lots. It's just sort of temporary. And most of the people just used them in the summertime. And this was a property, we sent out a batch of direct mail offer letters to people. And the son of the owner contacted me by email and said, hey, I got your offer letter. I'm interested in going forward with it. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And, because we send out actual offer letters with the price on it and everything. And, some people respond and are interested. Some people are like, well, I'm interested in selling, but it's got to be at this price. And we see if we could work out a deal. And then some people, get angry that I sent them a low offer, so it's kind of the combination of all those things. But So this one, yeah, they just he responded to me by sent me an email and said that. And then I looked, I looked into all the details at that point and really dug into it. And I was like, okay, I think this property is worth like 40,000. I think the contract price was about 17,000 and some change. So I was like, okay, this works. Kind of
Yep.
the benchmark always is to try to double our money. Like if we're buying for 17, we want to sell it for, 35. Um, but so yeah, so in that case, like the numbers checked out, and I contacted a local agent, which I saw had sold some stuff in that community, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about this property? And they're like, well, it's not perfect, it's really sloped and stuff like that, but you should be able to get, like 35 to 40. And I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good about it. And yeah, so then I was like, I talked my wife into it. I'm like, this is a good one. This is a good one to go for. So we just bought it and put it on the market with that agent that gave us the broker price opinion. And I think we listed at 39.9. And then within a few days, we got an offer for 35,000 cash. And I was like, let's take it. So that's what ended up happening. So we took the
Dang.
deal, and yeah, I think we made about like $15,000 or something like that on the deal,
That's just,
with after all commissions and closing costs and stuff. So
that sounds like a pretty cookie cutter deal. Is
yeah,
that kind of what you go for around that price point, that profit? Is that
uh,
pretty much a good one?
well, I try to do a lot bigger deals now.
Mm,
So that would be I would still do that deal these days, but I don't look for those deals as much. Like I wouldn't throw that out if I saw a deal that came in 17,000 and I could sell it for 35. I mean, that's a good day at the office. But I like deals. The range that I really like right now are like, the 100,000 plus deals. Those are kind of the ones that I really enjoy. Anything 50,000 plus though is kind of in our wheelhouse though.
yeah.
We'll do all different ranges. The biggest one that I've done was we bought it for 450,000 and we sold it for 979, something like that. So that was a good one. So
That's a
that
good
was
one.
recently, yeah. So, and it was only on the
Dang.
market for like a week. So
So, okay, hold on. So you just bought that's just doing one, you weren't subdividing it or anything. That's just buy it, list it.
yeah, there was,
Whoa.
there was that one was a little bit interesting because there was a problem to work through. The seller, they hadn't been to the property in many years, like they had owned it. It was this large property, like a big 1,500 acre property.
Hmm.
So biggest
Yeah.
property I ever bought. And there was a road that kind of led to the property, and it was an access road. And there was some question, like some of the neighbors were saying, "Oh, this property doesn't have access through this road and this gate that was there," you know. So we got the title report and everything like that, dug into it, and we confirmed that it actually did have deeded, access and everything like that. So then we had to communicate that with the neighbors and stuff like that. So there was a little bit of a thing to work through, and I think the seller was kind of just not willing to dive into that issue and get it resolved and stuff like that. So in that one, I do view it as a little bit of a value add because we made something that was questionable access and defined it and confirmed that we did have legitimate access and everyone was aware of it. So yeah, that was an interesting situation. But yeah, that was a good one. I'd love to do deals like that every day, but they don't come along very often.
Man, that's crazy. Okay. So I imagine at your level, and I might be wrong, but how many deals are you funding yourself versus using deal funding partners? Is it some or both or all of one, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, we don't use any deal funding partners. In
Oh,
fact,
really?
I fund deals for other people now. So, like, in the fact that deal, that 1,500 acre property, we did it with a partner. The partner brought the deal, and then we kind of took it over. What we do is with our partners that bring the deals. Like, I've got a pretty extensive team built out with all my um, due diligence and lots of different transaction people, and the whole team is kind of runs like a oiled machine. So what I do is I offer a program where investors bring the deal. I look at it and if I say, hey, that's a deal, I'd fund that deal. then basically we'll handle everything else from there. So like we plug it into all of our processes, do all the due diligence, pay for any value add stuff, surveys, brush clearing, any of that kind of stuff. Find a broker to resell it for us. And then when it sells, then we just split the profits 50-50. So um,
Wow.
so
That
we kind of take it to it. We take the funding thing to the next level. We try to make it a real win-win for both sides. Like we bring the money too, and they just have to bring the deal. So
So how many people are submitting leads? Like, do you just have more than you can count to go through, and you're cherry picking like the home run deals, or like
uh
how does that look?
yeah, we have certain criteria. We do get a lot of deals submitted. You know, right now it's probably averaging, between 5 and 10 deals a day, something like that.
Hmm.
And yeah, so they've got to meet our criteria, which our criteria is like we want to look for a double, like buy for 50,000, sell for 100,000. That doesn't mean we'll actually double our money after commissions and closing costs and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of our minimum criteria. And the other thing is that we want there to be at least $10,000 in profit for each deal partner, projected profit. So
Oh, I see.
$10,000
So it
for
has to be a
us,
big enough deal.
$10,000 for the investor. Yeah. So for instance, we get some deals submitted that are like, okay, this purchase price is 5,000 and we can sell it for 20, you know, even that's a great return, but there just isn't enough profit, like enough absolute profit in it to
Right. Like,
like
yeah.
go
I
through all this
mean,
stuff.
I
So
imagine at your point, just you got to think about how much time you're spending on something, right? Because if you
yes, yeah,
spend your time looking for $5,000 versus the same amount of time spent on I could see how that could get crazy if you get people sending you
yeah.
deals for $1,000 and trying.
Yeah, yeah, and so we're kind of upfront with that, and at some point here, we're going to even bump that up further, 15 to $20,000 minimum per side or something like that. But that's kind of where we're at right now. So,
Okay, from what I've heard from other people, they utilize deal funding in addition to doing their own deals because of scaling. How have
yeah.
you worked through that process of scaling? Has it just been a slower process, or have you found a way to fund all your deals and grow equally as fast? Because I mean, obviously, you've gotten to. I mean, you're probably doing more deals than most of the guys I've seen, even. So, how have you scaled using that strategy? Has it hindered you? Has it been better?
It's been good. I did in kind of my journey. I think I did in year one, I did partner on one deal or two deals on
Okay,
year one.
but at this,
But after that, I did one deal that I partnered with someone else on in year two, and they were just kind of bigger deals. Um, but I haven't partnered with anyone since then. But it's for me, like I was pretty lucky because I did have a decent amount saved up to get started with a little pool of money to start with, at least that my wife would allow me to kind of have work with on this, like because I'm sure she had to feel confident that this was all going to work and everything like that too.
yeah,
So yeah, I started out with some money to get the machine rolling, and then I just kept parlaying it into more and more and more. So it really snowballs fast. Like if you could just consider just like reinvesting that money into more deals and more deals, especially when you're doing deals like your average hold time is like 60 to 90 days. You can keep that money like continually circulating. Like my daughters, I've got two daughters, and um, they've been interested in land flipping and everything, and now they're a lot more involved in the business and stuff. But um, a couple years ago, they had come to me. They're like, "Hey, Dad, this looks pretty cool. I want to do this too, or whatever." So I was like, "Okay." So I kind of uh, was like, "I'll send you a couple of my smaller deals and stuff, and you can buy them yourself, and then go through the whole process." So to make a long story short, they started out with $8,000 between them, which they had saved up from various things. And over the course of 6 deals, they parlayed that $8,000 into $84,000. So just by,
dang.
keeping that money rolling, and they live with us. So it's, they don't have any, big expenses and stuff like that. So it was really good for them to kind of learn firsthand. But that's a good example of how you can take in this business, you could take a certain amount of capital and really kind of parlay it into a bigger amount of capital pretty quickly.
Yeah, holy smokes. That's so cool. Um, Or do you ever wholesale any of the deals, or are you closing on all of them?
We're closing on all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I wouldn't be opposed to it if the right deal came along, but I don't look for it. Like a lot of times it just kind of makes sense to close it. Then I
Yeah.
feel like we've got the most control over things, and then we can kind of, do our, the best possible exit plan.
Man, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because yeah, once you close on it, that deal's not going anywhere. That's
Yeah.
on
It
the
allows us to market it on the MLS and retail and stuff. And I know you can do that, kind of wholesaling sometimes, but there's a lot of barriers to that are coming up as well. So
Oh yeah, totally.
yeah.
Okay. Um, so how many mailers did you send your first mailer versus now? Like how has that evolved?
Yeah, my first mailer was 10,000.
Okay, so pretty big, right?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty big. I like to go big on stuff. As you can probably tell. That was in right after Thanksgiving in 2020. So I did that first deal in March of 2021 when it came full circle, when I resold it. I think we bought that property in February, resold it in March is when it closed. But so yeah, I've sent out the first mailer right after Thanksgiving in 2020. Uh, I screwed it up big time actually. I priced it, way too low. Um, and I was mailing in just like some of the hottest areas at the time in the whole country, and I think I priced it like 25% or something. Well, what I thought was 25%. And, I got terrible. The only real interested people I got were people that had really crappy properties. I remember one that came back. I looked at when I went to look at it, I forget what tool I was using at the time, but it pulls up the image of it, with the lot lines, and it's like all underwater. It's like off the shore, it's all underwater.
Oh
And
no.
they had signed, the offer instead of activating. I was like, oh no. Um, and then I posted about it in this one group I was in. They're like, you should do an oyster farm. And they were like serious. I'm like, I don't want to be an oyster farmer, like I just gotta find better deals. So
Okay, so that's interesting. You're sending like a contract, basically like a purchase and sale
yeah,
agreement.
yep.
Oh,
It's a 2-page letter. Page one is who we are, like why we're contacting them, what we can do for them. Page two is an actual 1-page purchase agreement, specifies their property information at the top, the price, the acreage, and some real basic terms in the middle with spot for them to sign, spot for us to sign, and that's it.
and you send it with your signature on there.
No, we just
Oh,
have
you do. Okay.
it just says like Real Vest Properties like acquisition team or something like that because that's the name of our company. So,
All right.
and then we sign like after they send it back signed or contact us. A lot of people contact us first and are like, hey, I got this offer. We're interested, and it's a starting point. Sometimes we're too high in our offers, sometimes we're too low, sometimes we're just right, but it's a discussion starter.
Mhm.
So it's impossible to get blind offers, right? And I know a lot of people really put a lot of effort into getting their pricing, perfect, but it's impossible. It's
Yeah.
impossible unless you're looking at every single property. And that's maybe fine if you're sending out, 100 letters, but if you're sending out, you know, 50,000 a month or something, it doesn't
Right.
really work too well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that you would just get a deal from somebody that does never seen you or talk to you, or it really does. It makes sense that it's just the conversation starter. Because even if you are there on price, I mean, how do they know anything? And usually, you probably want to talk to the person you're going to do business with, which
Yeah.
at least they know you're serious with that. But yeah, I guess it's probably more important to send the mail, right, rather than
Yep.
worry about the number as much. Okay. Um, so picking a market, right? So you do deals with everybody that sends you. Like I imagine that's just kind of doesn't matter where it is, or do you focus on certain areas, or how do you pick your markets?
Yeah. We'll do deals anywhere. I mean, we do a lot of lead generation ourselves. So we have certain areas that we focus on. Right now, like our bread and butter has been the direct mail. Like that's how we generated most of our deals. All like the first 2 years, 100% of our deals. This year, this 2023, that's just the second half of 2023, we started digging into some other techniques to generate deals, specifically cold calling and pay-per-click, and also the deal partner program that we talked about. So now we've got 4 ways that we're bringing in deals. But direct mail is still our bread and butter and the majority of our marketing spend. So with direct mail, we can clearly define what areas that we're sending to and everything like that. So we're always just kind of looking for areas that kind of work well with the types of properties that we like to buy, and trying to get a little momentum in a particular area. And when I say momentum, meaning like we get it, we send out offers to a particular county or something, we get a deal, and we find an agent that's very qualified and willing to work with us and knows their stuff. And then we try to do more deals around that particular area. So
Mm.
we kind of think of them as little kind of like branch offices or whatever to kind of expand, all these little areas all across the country. And then,
Okay.
when we're talking pay-per-click or, for the deal partner side of things, like these deals come in all over the country. We don't really have a lot of control of where they're at. And yeah, we're fine doing deals anywhere. So it just depends. Like some types of properties resonate with us, some don't. But as long as the numbers work and we're confident about the value and everything like that, then we'll do it. Doesn't really matter to me what state or whatever it's in.
Nice. Okay. What do you have a niche you focus on in land, like as far as the infill versus rural? Do you prefer one or the other, or something I'm missing?
I definitely prefer the rural
Mm.
properties, larger rural properties too. But I'll do I'll do anything. But for most of our outreach stuff or direct mail and everything like that, I'm always trying to find the larger rural properties.
Mm.
Infill lots, we buy a lot of them too, but especially the second half of 2023. So it really doesn't matter too much to me. But if I had my preference, it'd be the larger rural properties, just because they're easy in my opinion. There's not a lot. If you're going to have a larger rural property, you don't have to be so focused on whether there's some sort of building restriction or something that you're missing, which would make the lot, like not valuable at all. Like the ones that worry me are, properties that are kind of in a build out area, and you've got, this infill lot that wasn't built on for some reason. I'm always thinking like, well, why wasn't it built on? Like, is there some reason here that I'm trying to dig out and just make sure that I don't get stuck with someone else's problem, and pay
Yeah.
too much for it? So those worry me a little bit more. And we have a lot of stuff in place to research these properties. So it's not as big of a deal as it used to be, but you know, it's still something that concerns me a little bit. We just try to make sure to uh dot all our I's and cross all our T's. So
Okay. Yeah, it's just for people listening, wondering like, how do you evaluate a deal? Like, what is that? I mean, I'm sure you can go super granular, but like, say you take a real piece of land, what are some like bullet points that every time you're going to check these things? And if one of those things isn't there, it's not a deal. Like, do you have something like that you could share?
yeah, I mean, with most of these properties, one of the big things is access. So we always make sure there's access, whether it's on a public roadway or some sort of deeded access off a dirt road, or even an easement where there's no physical access, but as long as there's an easement, uh that's kind of a big thing. If there's no easement or no legal access to the property, then we pass on them every single time. I know
Mm.
some other investors will buy those types of properties. They'll just buy them really cheap and then try to either establish access or try to sell it to a neighbor or something like that. But it's a lot of work, and it's just kind of not my niche. So I always
Yeah.
look for access. I'm looking at the topography. I want to make sure the property's not too sloped. Slope properties don't sell very quickly. You have to be getting them really, really cheap in order. And then when I say sloped, I mean really sloped. I mean, there's a lot of properties that have, some slope to them and they're fine. But the ones that are really steep on the side of the mountain and stuff like that, it's ones I
Very.
would pass on. Ones that are like completely wetland, standing water type wetlands, not really usable for much of anything. Some properties have a combination of dry and wetlands, and that's fine, as long as you're pricing it, as long as you're buying it correctly. But the ones that are completely like a swamp, there's not really much you can do with that. So stuff like that. Those are kind of the main things that I'm looking at. And it comes down to location, like with any real estate, certain areas are more valuable than others. So we're always looking at the value for that particular area. We're trying to get an idea of what those properties go for in that area. And with rural properties, a lot of times we're looking at per acre costs. And I know a lot of investors get caught up in the trap of like thinking, okay, this 10-acre property down the street, this sold for this amount, and this sold for $10,000 an acre. So this one that I'm looking at must be worth the same thing. But what they don't really consider is is it apples to apples? Because that one down the street might be a nice pasture with very level ground and just a really nice property. The one they're looking at might be half wetlands and just some bad features to it, poor access and stuff like that. And they'll look at those the same just because it's a 10-acre one so close, and they don't really consider the apples to apples aspect of it. So you want to be making sure that you're comparing like properties. So
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Have you ever had a deal that didn't sell or went bad, or can you give an example of maybe one, or has there been
yeah, I
no?
mean, I've had a number of properties where knock on wood, I haven't lost money on any deals yet.
Man, that's
Got
awesome.
like a couple hundred deals already done. Um, but yeah, it's going to happen, I know, at some point, but I try to be pretty conservative in my approach, the price that we buy these properties for, and we try to do as much research as we can before we actually close on it. But I've had a number of properties where we're just over break even, 500 buck profit or $1,000 profit. And, like one of them in particular, it was, this kind of happened somewhat recently, at least it closed somewhat recently. We bought it. I think we owned it for, this is the longest one I ever owned. It was like a year and a half. And I bought it for, off the top of my head, I'm thinking like maybe 17,000 or something like that. And I think we had it listed for like 39,000 originally, and we got a buyer for it right away. Just a 2-acre property, and it actually was buildable, had a approved perk test and that kind of stuff. So there was no problems there. But I guess it was just in an area that was kind of like way off the beaten path, and no one really wanted to live there. And so, but anyhow, we got it under contract right away. The buyer was doing one of these land and home package loans, which is kind of like a manufactured home and the land kind of combined into one loan.
Okay.
And those loans take forever to close, especially with some of these companies. And they make the process really difficult. So anyhow, we had this one buyer, and I thought everything was going great. And I think 4 months into this escrow contract, found out that they didn't qualify or something like that. So we had to put it back in the market. Then we had to reduce it. And it actually happened 3 times. It was on the market and off the market, 3 different contracts that
Wow.
fell out. So it was just one of those deals. And then we kept on reducing it each time because we'd put it on the market, and then everyone would be thinking, well, what's wrong with this thing? They're looking at it like that. But so I think we ended up making like $1,000 after holding it for a year and a half. So for me, that's uh not a big win at all. So, but at least
Yeah,
I didn't lose money. No,
yeah, you
it
didn't
took a
use,
lot of time.
and you probably learned from the experience and all that stuff as well. So that counts.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that it's harder to have a deal go bad if you close on it and you can just list it, and then time is kind of on your side because it's not going to go anywhere. You own it. You still have
Right.
the equity in it, and so now it's just a matter of when the right buyer is going to come along.
Yep.
Obviously, it's a really good deal for someone, then that's how you move them quick. Um, but yeah, that makes sense. Um, okay, what was I going to ask about? Have you gotten into subdividing at all?
Yeah. Yeah, we do some subdividing, minor subdivision stuff is what we like to do. So not the major subdivisions where we're plotting out 100, lot subdivision in a city or something like that. We're not doing stuff. Although I've gone down that path a little bit, but never kind of officially, had it done. I had an engineer on one property kind of draw up a potential subdivision on a couple properties actually, and then we just marketed it, with a commercial broker saying, "Hey, here's what you could do with the property." In fact, I own one of those right now where we're kind of still doing that. So we'll see how it ends up. But I didn't actually physically subdivide it or even get it, approved on paper. But other ones, like we like the minor subdivision ones. In a lot of these areas, you're simply hiring a surveyor to go out there and split it up on paper and maybe stake it on the ground, and then that's your subdivision. So in a lot of areas, it's like 10 acres or more, depending on the state or the county. And yeah, that's a really easy process. And that's a great way to add value because when you're buying a big property, say 50-acre property, you may be picking it up for 5,000 per acre. But then once you subdivide it into 5, 10-acre properties, then you might be able to increase the value per acre to 10,000 an acre. So, uh, so that's a great way
That's
to
awesome.
do it.
So is that kind of the size, or do you focus on deals for that are generally like the 1,500-acre deals you're doing? Are you looking for a specific criteria, like, okay, I'm going to do this mailer and we'll try to subdivide some of these, or do they just happen to be in the pipeline already, and you're like, now then you decide from there?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for them. Typically, when we're putting together a mailer or something like that, I'll be putting it together in the mail, or I'll be like a whole county, and I'll be like 10 acres plus.
Hmm.
Everyone, everyone that has a 10-acre plus property gets a letter from me. So, and then we see what comes back. Some of the properties would be bigger properties where there's potential to subdivide them. There's some things that come into play. A lot of times it depends on how much road frontage there is and some other stuff, um, but yeah, so that's kind of the thing that we look at with that. So
Okay. Now, it sounds like a lot of it's just, blasting to a bunch of people, anybody that owns the land there. Do you ever get granular with it and like look for people with tax liens, or people that are losing it because they aren't making payments or something? Or do you ever go specific marketing like that?
I mean, I should do more of that stuff, especially when breaking into a new area. I've kind of always thought about that. Like to break into a new area, I should be really doing a really defined list.
Hmm.
And then when I get some traction, then kind of send to the rest of the people.
Oh, I
So
see.
that would be what I would do if I was really smart, but I'm not. So
Well,
no.
something's working, so I don't know. It might be good to stick with
No,
it.
like that's what I recommend kind of the people that I help get going and stuff. I'm like, hey, if you have a limited budget for the mail and everything like that, probably want to be pretty refined on your list, you know. And then when you get some traction and everything like that, then you can kind of broaden up that criteria. But and one of the big things that I track over time is like the cost per deal. So for us, you know, like this last year, I think it ended up being about $3,500 in mail per deal. So, which is a little over, 7,500 letters or something like that, based off of the cost of a little over 50 cents per letter that we send out. So, so I think
That's
that's how it
really
works.
good compared to other businesses. Like
Hmm.
$3,500 for the amount of profit you're getting is kind of crazy. Because like even wholesaling real estate, I mean, depending on the market you're in, I know, especially direct mail, that gets crazy sometimes. I know I heard of people in Phoenix spending like $10,000 on mail per deal,
Yeah.
which, I mean, comparing it to working a 9 to 5 job, whatever, maybe you still make a good return, but like from at the scale you're at, even sending that much mail and it's 3,500, that's really impressive. So I think it just goes to show like how good of a vehicle land investing can be to make
Yeah.
good returns.
Well, over the last year, our average profit per deal was over 29,000. So when I look at that, like, okay, it cost me $3,500 to get a deal. And I could refine it more. Maybe I get that down to 2,000 or even 1,500 per deal or something like that if I really refine my list. But then I'm like worried that I'm missing out on people that other people are filtering out. So
Yeah.
I'm fine paying 3,500 and making 29,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
totally. Now, okay, so you've built this money printing machine where you can kind of just plug and play and get some good cash flow. Uh, I imagine that's going to be a pretty big tax burden, just getting all that active income. Are you now venturing into like other asset classes to offset taxes a little bit, or how do you manage that?
yeah, that's the game. Well, first of all, we've been really in a big growth mode. So like we're reinvesting a lot of the money that we've got into building our team, all kinds of stuff, so we've got lots of business expenses because we're trying to grow and we're trying to be one of the largest um, land investment companies in the United States. So that's the goal. And so it costs money to reinvest. And I've got a big team now too. So I've got, I think 12 people on this side of things that are kind of working full time and doing everything. So, but yeah, that's the game as far as the additional profits above that. Trying to buy assets to hold for the longer term to get the accelerated depreciation to then offset your profits. So I'm a real estate professional, so I qualify in that category, and it's kind of a unique thing. Even though they're bringing that down, the accelerated depreciation that you could write off, it's still pretty good, probably pretty good benefit for real estate investors for sure.
So what do you like? Rentals, commercial? What's your cup of tea as far as?
Yeah, I would buy anything. We own a motel that we bought
Whoa,
to
okay.
rehab and everything like that. We haven't really done much with that project. So if you're looking to buy a motel, let me know. Uh, uh, and some rental properties and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, to me, I know I'm not going to get rich off of buying those types of things. They're kind of a long-term play, and they're kind of not my focus. But
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
um,
honestly, yeah, with what you got going on with your main thing,
mhm,
how could you
yeah.
focus on anything else? But
Plus, I've never considered myself good at like managing tenants or anything like that. And I don't really want to do that. And even managing the managers that manage the tenants, it's I don't know, I've struggled in that category a little bit. So just not my thing. So
it's certainly
it's
not
just
passive.
yeah, yeah. It's not
But
fun for me. So like it's fun for me doing deals, like buying and selling stuff. Like that's fun. Like that resonates with me. The other stuff, it's kind of like I gotta do it, and and because of that, I don't do as good of a job as I probably should. So
sure, okay. And kind of in that note, do you ever seller finance your deals?
no, nope, we
Oh,
sell them
that,
all for
okay.
cash. Yeah, I do work with a note buyer
Mhm.
that will sell or finance deals for me in certain situations that we've used. So like, you know, buyers will inquire like, hey, will you hold the financing on these properties? I don't want to like take payments for someone for 10 years, in a $50,000 property or something like that. Just doesn't make any sense to me. Like the logistics involved with that and everything. I'd rather just make the 20,000 and move on to the next deal. Um, but yeah, so I have a note buyer that will basically hold the note for the end buyer. So, we established the criteria from the beginning, so everyone's on the same page. Like, okay, it's got to be 20% down. You got to have a 680 credit score, and it's an 8-year loan at this rate, and all this kind of stuff. So then when it closes, the note buyer just buys it for me at closing. So I get to cash out, and I have to take a discount on that note, so I don't get the full face value of the note.
Sure.
But still, figure it out so the numbers work. So
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, because I've heard of guys that'll get a pretty good, just as probably as passive as you can get compared to normal rental properties. But look at a
yeah,
portfolio of notes that they're getting, a couple $100 a month on each of them. Um, so,
yeah,
but I mean,
that's a whole nother business model. Like that, I know a lot of people that do that and do really well with that. It's just not really, it doesn't align with me, so that's why I don't do it. Like I'm more into the big
Mhm.
chunks. So that's what I like
Yeah.
better.
All right. So yeah, I mean, from what I can tell, like you said, it sounds like you're going big on all this, and the numbers you're doing right now to most people seem kind of crazy. What's your like long term vision with this? Like, what are the crazy numbers that you want to do, or do you see a certain point where you want to get it, and then you might just like go to something different, or like, what's your long term vision for your land investing?
Yeah, well, I see no reason in the next 3 years or so that we can't be doing $100 million in revenue per year. So, which means that we're going to have to really expand on a lot of things, and not just the number of deals that we're doing, but the types of deals that we're doing, and kind of expanding into new categories. And it's not just more of what we do; it's thinking things in a different way. I really want to get into renewable energy projects. There's a lot that could be done in the land development space. I also have an interest in distressed commercial properties. I think that's a really cool niche, especially if you're able to buy them off market and turn them into something that's functioning again. There's big money to be made in that. Starting a fund related to maybe distressed commercial property, something like that. I think it would be a great way to kind of expand the business. But the land flipping thing itself, I think, no problem. I think I can. I mean, not no problem, but it's gonna be tough. But I know I can get it to 100 million in revenue within like the next 3 years. And being like, I want to be one of the largest land investment companies in the United States. So I don't even know who the biggest players are, but I'm just kind of focused on myself at this point. And
It'll be the Black Rock of land investment.
yeah, who knows down the road.
I heard Bill Gates is buying like a crazy amount of land. Have you heard that?
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting because you wonder like what they're seeing. Is it going to be super profitable, or do they have some, maybe they're getting into farming or something? But I don't know. It
Yeah,
just seems
he actually lives not too far from me. I live in Del Mar, California, and we used to walk past his house because they just built like a huge house like right on the beach. And I was thinking, oh, one of these days he's gonna walk out of his house and I'm gonna like ask him about it. So because I've heard that thing too, but I never saw
dang,
him.
that'd be crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, I mean, land. I think the future looks bright for that. I think it has all the benefits of like normal flipping with a lot less of the negatives, like you were saying, like as far as what can go wrong. Do you feel like the competition is less as well? Like, are these people getting bombarded with mail constantly, or do you think it's kind of more of a blue ocean?
The hot areas get mail, but it's definitely way more of a blue ocean than house flipping. I mean, when you
Yeah.
think about like just in talking about my story, like there's been all these shows on HGTV about home flipping since like early 2000s, probably in the late 90s even they were on. But I mean, people were excited about it back then, and it's just kind of built and built and built over time. So many people know that business model and are doing it. They're just kind of all fighting over the same limited pool of deals, and it's not anywhere close to that with land flipping. I mean, there's a lot of land. Like, you're a pilot, you fly over all these areas. When you look
Crazy.
down, like most of it looks empty, right?
Yeah.
So, so
Tell me about it.
when you
Yeah.
just look at it from that 30,000-foot view that we're talking about, it's you could just see that there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of people coming into the country, and there'll always be a lot of people coming into the United States. So I think for the long term, I think it really makes a lot of sense, and the fact that internet access, high speed internet access is pretty much available in all these rural areas and everything now. People moving out of big cities. I think there's just a lot of factors that kind of combine to make it, you know, make it make sense. It makes sense in my mind, that, a lot of these areas will be more and more valuable over time. So.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. Okay, I mean, as we're kind of getting towards the end here, I want to give people some action steps or maybe some nuggets they can go implement. So, like, say you're starting, maybe you're coming from another industry, maybe you're living on your mom's couch and you're in high school, or I guess that would make sense if you're living at home. But like, say you're starting at the
Yeah.
bottom and you want to get into land investing. How would you in this market 2024, how would you go about getting started?
Yeah, you got to learn how to do it first of all. You got to learn how to evaluate properties. You got to learn the nuts and bolts of the business model itself. Like what's the letter you send, like who you send it to, how do you pull your list, like all the kind of logistical things as far as the business itself goes. But you got to learn how to evaluate properties. That's really the most important thing, and not just pull it up on Zillow and look at it. Like you got to really understand uh what makes a piece of land, what makes one piece of land different from another piece of land, and what makes one worth this and what makes the other one worth that, and like all these nuances to it. So first thing you got to do is learn. And if you get really good at like figuring out what properties are worth, it's way different than flipping homes too. Like that's easy to figure out. Like comping homes, like the
Yeah,
home five houses down just sold for this amount and it was in this condition. You just make some adjustments here and there, and you know what the thing's worth.
yeah.
But a land is not that way. Every piece of land is pretty much different, unless you're doing infill lots, where there's a lot of slots that are the same that are selling. But um, so yeah, that's the big thing. You gotta learn how to do that. So
Okay, so learn the groundwork, the baseline, and then go. Would you say get into mail or get into cold calling or?
Yeah, I think mail's the best. Cold calling is one of those things that I guess if you have no budget, that's a good way to start. But you're going to put up with a lot of rejection. You're going to put up with a lot of sellers that are non-motivated sellers.
Mhm.
So it's just a lot of time and weeding through that stuff. But if you have some budget to do some mail, even if it's a highly refined list or something like that we were talking about, I think that's your best bet. So yeah, like I've got a training program that teaches every single step of the process that I give away for free. So I've got a community where so everyone that wants to learn how to flip land, and I have a lot of experienced investors in there, and a lot of people just getting started. But I've got a training program that I have in there that is completely free that shows everyone like the entire business model. So,
Wow.
um, and the reason I give it away for free, at least I'm giving it away for free right now, but is that I'm hoping that people learn how to do this and then bring me deals that we can partner on. So that's kind of the thought.
Awesome.
And plus, I've got kind of a higher dollar mentorship program that's super valuable as well. But I know that only a small percentage of people, may have the resources to take advantage of that or whatever. So.
That's awesome. Well, cool, man. Do you have any books you recommend to read, whether it's just like self-improvement, life advice, land investing, any books?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of good ones out there. I guess what's interesting, it kind of depends where you're at in your entrepreneurial career or where you're at in your life, like what books may be the most valuable for you. If you're just kind of starting out, say that younger person that's just kind of getting out of high school or out of college and just trying to figure things out and get your life together. One of the most important ones I think you could do read or listen to is Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Mm.
And, that talks about goal setting, but it's more than just goal setting. It's about how to put the actual habits in place to allow you to achieve those goals. And, it's about mindset as well, like how to actually kind of rewire your mind in order to be the type of person that actually does those things to achieve your goals. So that's a really good one. And until you can kind of get a lot of those basics down, you may not thrive in a lot of the other areas. So you really get systematized on stuff. And if you're kind of like a higher level entrepreneur, it just kind of depends. You probably have experience in some areas and not in other areas. And then in those types of situations, it's kind of like looking at where your gaps are, trying to find who's the expert on that particular subject and just kind of really consuming that and becoming an expert in that particular area yourself. Like kind of pick those areas where you're like, okay, if I can learn how to do this and I'll just devote all my time and energy to this for the next 90 days, how would that change my life? How would that change my business? So you kind of got to look at it in that way, I think. So that's kind of always what I've done.
That's awesome. That's a good point. And kind of to that point, from your experience, it seems like most people look at their, they might say, oh, it took 5 years to get this crazy profitable business. I don't, 5 years is a long time. But then they'll spend the next 60 years or 40 years or whatever it is working a 9 to 5 job and then getting to retire and live maybe the least effective years of their life not working. I mean, compared to how about spend 5 years on something instead of spending your whole life doing something. It's just a perspective shift, I think. So
Yeah, well, and the crazy thing is, and there's different levels to it too. Like some people might be, it might be like if I was coming out of college and I didn't have anything going on, and I think my first job I was probably making, you know, 40,000 a year or something like that, so like so doing two deals where you're making 20,000 each on them in a year would be pretty impactful, right?
yeah,
Double your salary or whatever you're doing at your day job.
yeah,
So there's different levels to it. You don't have to be doing millions of dollars a year in profit to start out with. You could take those wins and kind of increase them from there. So like that one deal I was talking about, that 1,500-acre property, that was an investor that brought that deal, and they found the deal, they got it under contract and everything like that. But when it closed, they got a wire transfer for $185,000. They brought the deal and they got $185,000. And from the time they brought the deal and we agreed to do the funding, like we took it over from there in like handle the rest of the stuff. So,
It's
so
very good.
you know, so
Not a
that's
bad business.
that could make a big change in someone's life, I think. So that's not a typical deal at all. That's a kind of a outlier for sure. But I'm just saying that to illustrate what's kind of possible, and bigger things than that are way possible too. So
Sure. Listen, man, really appreciate you taking the time and giving so much value. I think it's every second of this podcast people can go and take and learn and implement in their life. So really appreciate that. Where can people find you if they want to, go look at your stuff or take your course or, get involved, follow you, see where you are now and see if you're taking over the land industry in the next 3 years. So how can people?
yeah. Well, the best place to go, there's a bunch of different addresses, websites and stuff I could give you where I've got my stuff all over, but the best place to go would be to landconquest.com. And that it'll just bring you to a little opt-in page. But as soon as you opt in there with your name and email and stuff, it'll take you right to my community. And it's a free community, and there's all kinds of discussion going on in there. But that's where you can find the training program. It's in the kind of classroom tab in that community. Also in there, I do a monthly income report. So you'll see those posted in there as well, and I've done that for the last couple of years. So every month I write up a monthly report, which shows like the revenue we did, the gross profit we did, every single deal we did that month, like what we bought it for, what we sold it for, notes about that particular deal, things I learned that month, where we are year to date, like all this stuff. I try to put out information that wasn't available when I was like learning how to do this business. So I was at that point, I was like, well, what's possible? Like there weren't people talking about it. So you can see what's possible, and the business model itself resonates with you. And then we're on, I've got Instagram, and TikTok. It's at Partner with Pete. So, and if you're interested in the deal funding program, that's just partnerwithpete.com. And obviously, we're on YouTube as well. And the YouTube is at Turning Profit. We have a podcast, an hour-long podcast that we do once a week. Comes out on every Tuesday. So
Awesome.
that's about lots of different stuff all over the place.
All righty. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. It's been a great episode, and get wealthy.
Thanks.